series today, presenting on Mastering EQ. We have Kurt Archambault and Jolene Garankin from PP Strat. Welcome.
Thank you, Tara, and the Council of Hotel and Restaurant Trainers. Kurt and I are lifetime members, and if you don't know anything about it, you need to go to chart.org for sure and look at some great information. They're doing a lot of different webinars and a lot of different tools and systems and things for trainers of all likes. And I'm Jolene Garankin with People and Performance Strategies, and came up from the restaurant industry, but we work in multiple industries. We really focus on helping individuals, teams, and organizations increase performance in one team member, one team, one organization at a time. So that's really what we do, and we're doing it remotely quite a bit now. Kurt?
Yes, as many of you on this call know me as well. For those that don't, I, like Jolene, came up through the ranks, have been in this industry and business for, it's weird that I have to say this out loud now, but going close to 40 years, which is kind of shocking. I know I look very good.
Lots of wisdom.
Yeah, so, and it's been very exciting over the last 11 or so years working with Jolene and working with clients on all kinds of aspects, from individual growth and development to team growth development up to strategic planning and everything in between. So we're excited to be here to share what we have to share with you all today. I did see a hand go up. I'm hoping that our friend Tara is kind of keeping an eye on those things for us. But we'll just go ahead and dive right into this thing. We're going to try to make this as interactive as possible. So we're going to use some polling. We're going to ask you some questions to ask you to type into chat. If you don't know where the chat is, we'll be monitoring. Go over to the three dots in the, on your screen, I think, or maybe it's already on your screen. And just make sure you have the chat box open so you can respond. And we'll go from there. So should I hit the first poll there, Jolene?
Yes, let's do it.
So as with all things technology-wise, we'll pray that it works. So you should see mere seconds. Our first poll. Basically, what we'd like to know is just your own personal experience. How much have you personally developed EQ awareness, your skills and abilities? And the responses are coming in fast and furious, Jolene. As you can see, we put there from a strongly agree to agree. Our ad by Tara, which was awesome, which is I'm not a total jerk, but I could use some work. That's the one I picked. Disagree and strongly disagree. So right now, and I'll go ahead and publish this polling in a moment, we got about 70% of you in. Right now, a vast majority, about 60%, have done some work in the area of EQ, building your own personal awareness, your skills and abilities. So that's awesome. What we hope to do as a result of today is kind of build upon that work that you've already done, maybe expose you to some tools and some resources that you can use to continue to grow that. So,
are you going to share it?
I will in just a second. We're at 89 of 111. So do you think 80% of the people voting is a good number?
Good. That's good. Let's keep moving.
Statistically validated. I don't know. Here you go. So there's the number. You can see 54 of you have done some work around this area. So that's some pretty amazing stuff. And I appreciate those of you that were also sharing that, no, I haven't done a lot, or I could still use some work. That's fantastic. And those of you that have strongly agreed, if you have additional comments, feel free to put those in the chat. Anything that you've learned that we may not cover, throw that out there, and we'll try to make sure we highlight that as well.
Right. And a lot of the people on the call are probably trainers. So, being able to take some of this information potentially and utilize it with your teams and with the operations teams and sales teams and things like that. So I'm going to close that poll.
Did you close it too?
Oh, I think you need to close it for everybody.
I tried.
I'm going to start by talking about IQ versus EQ. So IQ is really a test, right? It's an intelligence test. It's intelligence quotient, versus EQ is really focused on that emotional quotient. So how do I show up? How self-aware am I? And that's the big difference. When you look at emotional intelligence, and Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is a great book, but it's broken down into self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and then relationship management. And there's buckets underneath each of those that we can continue to grow and develop in, but we're going to make it even a little bit more simple today. And we're going to focus on different mindsets and how we can shift our mindsets.
I'm working on that.
Changing of the slide.
It's a little delay, just so you
So
know.
the ability to read emotional and interpersonal needs of a situation and respond accordingly. So it really is about understanding myself, understanding others, and really how do I show up, and how do I respond, and how do I stay composed in a lot of respects as well in different situations.
Yeah, and I know, Jolene, one of the things that we talked about as we prepared this is, as the world has continued to evolve over the last 3 months, you know, it's there's a higher degree of EQ needed out there in the workplace, right? Because we're all
Right.
dealing with stuff that we may have not dealt with ever in our lives, and how do we interact with our team members, but also recognize how we're reacting to certain
That's right.
situations. So
Yep.
we found this to be kind of a timely topic.
So when you think about a person that you really liked working with in the past, or maybe right now you like working with, you know, what, you know, in what ways was that person emotionally intelligent? When you think about, you know, what were those traits or things that you noticed about them? Go ahead and put those in the chat box, and Kurt and I will try to read most of them. But you know, what was it that you really liked when it came to that person and their emotional intelligence? So listening skills are a big thing, right? It's not seek first to understand, then be understood. Empathy, eye contact, which is very hard when you're talking to a computer. They like their world, supportive, enthusiastic. They had good sense of how they felt. They included others. They were good with their word. No roller coaster of emotions. Anything I missed, Kurt?
No, I get, you know, empathy came up quite a bit. That positivity seems to be
Yeah.
continuing. The terms reading the room really
Yep.
came up a lot in this conversation. Calmness, you know, and as you think about all of these demeanors, these style, this reaction, you know, again, think about what the last 3 months have been and how important that skill set, you know, that person you're working with while you're trying to deal with this unknown changes, you know, how impactful it is right now.
That's right.
Amazing.
And then think about that same person, and you know, what do you think are aspects that they could have improved upon? Even, you know, thinking about the last 3 months, you know, what are things that you think about when you think about emotional intelligence and that teammate or that the coworker? What do they maybe struggle with when it comes to emotional intelligence?
Yeah.
Some
Empathy comes up again. So on the flip
Yeah.
side,
Yep.
yes,
Communication, tact.
unpredictability.
You know, some of us that are pretty direct might have a problem with tact. Showing anxiety, taking their time to respond.
Yep.
Being
Bottling up
empathetic.
frustration.
So the same, very similar traits that are in the positive can also be that you can also struggle with.
Yeah, yeah. And it's pretty amazing too when you think about it. I just had the opportunity to regional training forum for the West Coast. Kristen Burke ran it. We talked a little bit about this whole discussion, you know, and one of the points we discussed is, especially related to the last 3 months, you know, it's a Facebook post that's been going around. We're not all on the same boat. We're
Yeah.
just all weathering the same storm, and we all weather it differently. And so as we talked about emotional intelligence, we all handle ourselves differently in different circumstances. And we're going to talk more about how you can even get a deeper dive on you personally in a moment. But we all run the gamut. And for that same person that you thought about that did a great job with certain things like empathy may have had some challenges on some other aspects of
That's
emotional
right.
intelligence. So we'll give you little insights into that as well. So, ultimately, when you boil it all down, we all fall into this same kind of philosophy, right? Everybody wants to be seen, be heard, and to be understood. And this is like a fundamental need that we as people have. And I'll give some personal examples down the road, but I have a great deal of, I don't know what the word is, respect maybe, for those of you out there that have been managing a lot of issues at the same time, working from home, dealing with your staff, having your spouse at home with you. My wife is in the other room on a call right now as we speak. Those of you with children, that having them at home, not being able to go, all of these things are coming at you from every different angle. And so that ability to kind of understand what you need and then what they need is critical in this current environment that we're in. But moving forward down the road, 5 years from now, it's going to be just as critical. It just may not be as apparent. So we want to kind of arm you with some things that will help you in the future, but also in our current situation. So I don't know, Jolene, if you want to add anything onto that one.
No, keep rolling.
All right. So we also know, and both Jolene and I are big advocates, yes, we like to help people grow personally and professionally, but it's not just about feeling good. There has to be another level to it. So we want us to, navigate through life as effectively and efficiently as possible, but also what is the bottom line impact? What's the bottom line impact on the organization? What's the bottom line impact on the teams that we lead? How do they feel being part of the team? We're pivoting right now a little bit on that unemployment. 6 months ago, it was tough to find people. We were at the lowest unemployment ever. And so we put a lot of emphasis on reducing turnover. Well, now that unemployment's a little higher, we can't take away that emphasis. We still have to focus in on how do we keep high quality team members. And we believe that emotional intelligence impacts all of these things. And then the one that I put a lot of effort into now is the two, one on the bottom and the one on the top, that occupational stress. Mental health is a big issue right now that people are talking about in the workplace, and then our personal well-being, because if I'm feeling better, I'm sorry, I just got distracted by my automatic vacuum cleaner that kicked back on. So if you hear something in the background, I'll take care of it. But it's that increased personal well-being, right? If I feel more confident, more connected to myself, I'm a better leader for the folks that I lead and the team that I lead. So again, Jolene, anything you want to add to that slide as well?
No, I think this is a great time for the first short video that we're going to play. Okay. Kind of just a good overall recap of what we're talking about.
All right. And as many of you on this call know, that one of the tools that we use quite regularly in our business is the DISC model. So you're going to see a little bit of that. So those of you that are DISC educated or have done some DISC, you're going to see some reference to that. So let's make sure technology works. Here we go.
We all have abilities that come naturally to us. Certain skills or mindsets that are so second nature, so effortless. Using them feels like riding a bike. For Ava, that's keeping her cool when everyone around her is stressing out. Or setting aside her own preferences long enough to really consider other points of view. Those are both kinds of emotional intelligence, but they aren't the only ones. Because the truth is, there are many different ways to be good at handling emotional and social situations. And people have different natural strengths. So, what are yours? That's where Agile EQ comes in. Using a tool called Everything DISC, Agile EQ provides a simple way to understand yourself and the kinds of emotional intelligence that may come naturally to you. Everything DISC describes 4 main styles. People with a D, or dominant style, are typically direct and firm. Their emotional intelligence really shines when they need to project confidence and persuade others. And they're usually good at speaking up for themselves. Those with an I, or influence style, are generally outgoing and enthusiastic. They're naturals at making connections wherever they go. And they tap into the energy in a room by paying attention to how people are feeling. People with an S, or steadiness style, are usually even-tempered and accommodating. They often excel at understanding where other people are coming from, and their calm, flexible approach helps keep conversations harmonious and collaborative. And finally, those with a C or conscientiousness style are typically analytical and reserved. Their EQ strengths involve stepping back and separating facts from their personal feelings. And they're often good at showing restraint, even in tense situations. You might have one of these styles or a blend of two, like Ava, whose SC style means she has a combination of S and C traits. The strengths associated with that part of the disc map are probably easiest and most natural for her. But what about when Ava needs to, say, network with strangers or confront a coworker about a problem? In situations like these, she may have to reach for skills that don't come as naturally. And if she can't do that or doesn't think to try, that can create problems for her. Because sometimes our instinctive patterns don't work and actually end up boxing us in. Drawing on the principles of emotional intelligence, Agile EQ helps us discover our natural tendencies and recognize when to move beyond those familiar patterns. And that's what allows us to act, adapting to whatever situation we're facing. And that ability to adapt, to reach for a wider variety of responses, it's called agility. It's about stretching beyond our comfort zones when what's instinctive for us isn't enough. It means developing the flexibility to respond to different situations with the best possible approach, not just the one that's easiest. And really, the more agile we are in our responses, the more emotionally intelligent we become. And that empowers us to achieve things we never believed were possible, to enrich our relationships, and even to engage with the world in a new way.
All right,
So
I do love the peppy music. It's always good.
So it's time for our next poll, our second of three. And Kurt, you want to?
We will do that. So coming down, and I did see that Alma asked if we were going to get a certificate for this training. Just so you know, Alma, we have something even more special to include in that. So we'll let you know that in just a moment. So here's the second poll question. This is taking a little bit broader to the organization. Just a quick yes or no. Do you currently train leaders on increasing EQ or their EQ skills and abilities? So go ahead and type your response in there when I hit launch, and here we go. I don't know why I'm very excited about the responses, and I see them as happening. Right now, we are running about 60-30, 60-40 no, 60% no, 40% yes. We're at about 70%. We'll see if we can get up to that 80. But it looks like at this point, now, obviously, both Jolene and I are fully aware that currently there's a lot of resources going to just making sure we can get our businesses back open and up and running. There may be some on this call that have been working all through this and have not been as negatively impacted as our friends in the restaurant and hotel business have been. So we know that there are still resources. So I'm going to go ahead. Is the poll showing up? I can hit end polling now and share results. So again, we can see about 60% are not doing any formalized training around EQ. We do know there's a lot of platforms out there that people are shifting to that has maybe EQ components to it. So opening up that opportunity for your employees is amazing. So we'll talk more about that as we move through. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close that and then move on. So why is it important, Jolene, to be agile?
Well, I think, agility is really shifting, right? It's making sure that your approach is appropriate for the situation and really stretching outside your comfort zone and saying, if I'm very dominant, maybe I have to slow down and be more conscientious and listen more and be more empathetic in different situations. Different behaviors serve you better and different mindsets. And so really figuring out how do I change that paradigm is so important.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we tend to, as human beings, default to what's naturally easiest to us, right? I mean, we've all had some exposure to now discover your strengths, right? Do what you're really good at and minimize maybe what you're not as good at. And what we'd like to say is, you can adjust your style as it relates to the situation you're in and kind of give you some tools and some information in order to do that. But it really starts with our perspective. So we have a quick image here that should be popping up in moments. Yes. So for those of you that may or may not know, this is myself, a little bit more beardy right now, and my lovely wife Carla. And at every workshop that I post this sign up or this picture, I always ask the first question: pastors or realtors? What do you guys think? Do we look like pastors or realtors? Just a
I'm
little.
feeling like pastors.
A lot of people say pastors because of the palm fronds in the back. It looks
Yeah.
very, church-like in the background. But this exercise is actually something we like to do with a lot of clients that talks around perspective and where we come from. So we're going to give you an opportunity, and this is going to look weird, especially if you're working at home with your family, your children. They're going to wonder what you're doing. But take your index finger, put it up in the air like you just don't care, okay? And then what I want you to do is draw the letter E on your forehead. Okay, just draw a capital letter E on your forehead. All right. So just to make sure we give that a try, go ahead and do it one more time and draw that letter E. Now what I want you to do is I want you to think about how that letter E is being presented to those that are observing you do this. And so how many of you drew the letter E, and you just answer this for yourself like I did? It was more internally focused, like I'm drawing it for myself. Is that how you did, Jolene?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas my wife, when we did this exercise, and yes, we have some interesting Saturday nights here at the house, we were doing this exercise, and she drew it this way, where it was more externally focused. And it really highlights where we both start. So I start with me first, she starts with others. How does this apply in what we're talking about? That is where you might begin from an emotional intelligence standpoint. We're going to talk more and more about that as we go through and how this runs. But it's all about perspective, right? What is your perspective? And I can tell you, and many of you know, I strongly believe my perspective is the correct perspective, right, Jolene?
Of course you do.
Yes, whereas my wife, and many of you listed in those comments around EQ, she's a very good listener, and she will give me some space to share. Where the growth has to happen on both of us is I need to go to one side sometimes with her and not always get rooted in what's so easy for me. So we're going to talk more about how you can make that shift, but it all first begins with personal awareness. So I'm going to let Jolene talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we are big advocates of, DISC, D-I-S-C, created by Dr. Marston in the 1920s, and truly gives you a very simple way to be able to say, well, what do I tend towards more? Am I more outgoing? Am I more reserved? Am I more logic focused? Am I more relationship focused? And that self-awareness really does help you in your emotional intelligence and your EQ. And ultimately, you can continue to keep growing your EQ and growing and growing. So I'll give you an example of some of the growth that I've been through. But go ahead, Kurt, and do the next the next slide on. So when we think about it, and I want you to type in your disc style. If you know it already, go ahead and type it in, and Kurt's going to watch for that. But we'll get to, if you don't know disc, are you either fast-paced and outspoken, or are you cautious and reflective? So either extroverted or introverted. That's the first question. And then the next one is, are you more questioning and skeptical, or accepting and warm? So again, more logic and fact-based, or more relationship-based? Go ahead and do the next one.
All right. And just so you know, there's been quite a few C styles.
Oh,
yeah. But a lot
are
of
you just
IS
saying that
styles.
because that's your style?
I might be only focusing in on those. There are some Ds, some IDs that are already putting in there. So yes,
All right, good.
it runs the gambit.
I got some peeps here. So anyway, this will kind of give you what your primary style. Until you take an assessment, you don't know for sure, but it's pretty accurate, I think, and really good not to put people in boxes, but to truly understand them better so that you can communicate more effectively, which ultimately helps you with your EQ mindset as well.
Yeah. And I think we want to highlight too, many of the folks have been putting a blend, right?
Yep.
SC or ID or DI. I am personally a CD. My wife, as you met earlier, is an IS. So that explains a lot of our animated conversations. So you can be a blend. And then we will, at some point, we can talk about, how strong or natural or easy the style comes to you. You can run a gamut of that as well. So we have quite a few folks that are a blend, is what I'm seeing in the comment section.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep going.
Yeah. So, the good news is all perspectives are right. Now you're like, how can everybody be right? We're not saying everybody's right. We're saying all perspectives are right. And in essence, on a healthy team, you want to have all perspectives represented. You want to have all viewpoints heard. As an EQ leader, you're going to allow that room for that conversation to happen. It's very easy to get rooted in your particular perspective, and a high, strong EQ leader will allow other voices to come through. Now, I don't know, Jolene, do we want to talk a little bit about the complimentary thing we're going to do, or do we want to wait a little
Yeah,
bit?
so after, at the end of this, we're going to tell you how you can get a free assessment worth over $120, and that will be something that we offer as a gift to you. So as complimentary and no strings attached. So we'll talk a little bit more about how you get that at the
Okay.
end.
Perfect. Excellent. So one of the terms that we use as it relates to EQ is this concept of mindsets. So mindsets are basically a way to describe, how you tend to think about interactions and approach them, and it's your natural response. And I know we were going to talk a little bit about some personal examples, Jolene, as we were preparing for this, and it's amazing how this pops up at every moment, right? So I'm going to give you a quick example of a mindset that I have that impacted me just yesterday. So many of you know I have a 12-year-old granddaughter. For those of you who have kids, one of the things kids are potentially struggling through the whole stay at home, stay healthy component. And I got a call from my granddaughter, and she's like, "Hey, Poppy, I'm wondering, can you come down?" And of course, my natural mindset, and one of it is being a C style, and you'll see this, is I'm very resolute, I'm very action oriented, but I'm also process oriented. So all the things I think about was, well, I got this call I have to be in, I have this activity I have to do. Sweetie, I don't think I can make it. Maybe we can do this on Friday. And being a 12-year-old, and she kind of likes me, she was accepting of that. But then as I hung up and then I'm reading some information preparing for this call, I realized I missed a big opportunity. She was giving me some nonverbal cues, and I didn't really read the room very well. So I reached out to my daughter and said, "Is she okay? I think there may be more going on." And sure enough, my daughter investigated, and there was more going on. But that was a missed opportunity on my part. But it really talks about my automatic mindset is, what's the most efficient way of doing this? And that wasn't necessarily what that person needed in that moment. So I probably went off script a little there, Jolene,
Yeah.
but
That's all right. Yeah, I didn't see any of that in our notes.
it just popped into my head. So, as we describe, and we'll talk more about mindsets, we describe it around the DISC model as there's 8 mindsets that kind of are aligned a bit with what your natural style is as well. So for me as a CD, and fairly strong CD, this resolute, self-assured, and objective are really what drives me. Can you see these better, Jolene?
Yep.
Yeah, good. And so that resolute component was what was driving my engagement with my granddaughter in that time. When anybody want to guess what I might needed to have accessed in that moment? It's all the way on the other side. And we'll talk more about that empathizing component, which I failed. I missed that opportunity with her. So we'll talk a little bit more about each one of these. Part of that assessment that Jolene mentioned earlier is going to really help you recognize where you fall on these 8 and how you can effectively utilize what you're naturally good at, and then how you can stretch to those things that may not come as natural to you. So
That's right.
what you'll see, and go ahead, Jolene, if there's something you want to.
No, go ahead.
So we've given you an example. So in this example, if you're a D style, we had quite a few D styles on the call, you may naturally have that self-assured, dynamic, resolute, natural mindsets. It's not an absolute. Each one of us is slightly unique. So when you take the assessment, you might see some variations to this. But that may be your natural strength. That's your default. That's where you start. Where you may have some more challenges in reaching is across the model a little bit, that empathy, receptiveness, and composure. composed. And, all of those things can, if we recognize it, can lead to great dynamic conversations. If we don't recognize it, it can really lead to some challenging discussions. Yes. But you can adjust. There are some folks out there that say, your EQ is kind of set to who you are, but by doing what we do, we want to help you with your self-awareness of what you're naturally good at, but then how can you adapt? How can you move towards other styles that may not be as natural for you? And Jolene, where do you fall on this mindset?
So I'm up on the top, self-assured, dynamic, outgoing, and empathizing. And I think a good story example of this early on in my career was with Buffalo Wild Wings. I was part of the executive team. I think I was senior director of training and development. I didn't know what I didn't know about, executive presence and when to talk and when not to talk. And I remember, I don't know, I'm not going to give you all the story, but acting out a little bit and really, stating my case, being very self-assured and dynamic, when I really shouldn't have been. And a very dear friend and mentor, Tony Quist, talked to me afterwards, and I said, well, this happened. And she said, what, did you fall on your head? You should have been more receptive and composed. And so, we all have lessons, I think, in life, and it helps to build that emotional intelligence. And I do think, when I think about success in my career, I think emotional intelligence, being more self-aware and being aware of others, and that relationship management has really propelled me to be even, more successful than I had hoped. So.
Yeah, no, that's, I resonate with your story, because up until the time I started working with Jolene, I had a very deep-seated belief system around senior management and senior leadership, and probably did not interact with them in a way that was beneficial for the organization, but in the long run, wasn't beneficial for me either. And had I had that mentor like Tony, who may have stopped me and, hit me upside the head, I may have had, a little bit more success. I feel like I did good work, but I also was self-limiting at times. So that's what this awareness helps. And why we do this work is to build that awareness of what you're good at, not to ask you to change who you are, but adjust and apply. But what we'd like to do is show a little video of what can happen if you just stick with those things that you're good at. And so we have our second little video we'll show here. This one's a little bit shorter. So here we go.
In some ways, emotional intelligence is really a kind of problem solving. Each time you face a challenging situation, your EQ can help you determine the best action to take. For example, here's Ava again. She's in a meeting, struggling to get a word in as her more outspoken colleagues dominate the conversation. She has questions and ideas to express, but she's not sure how to make that happen. So Ava does what she normally does. She waits for pauses, and when there are none, she pretty much keeps her thoughts to herself. So imagine how she feels a few days later, when her boss wants to know why the team hasn't thought through the exact issues Ava wanted to bring up. Let's rewind back to the meeting. What went wrong? Did Ava miss an opportunity? Because the truth is that she has lots of options right now. Like, she could ask the team to slow down so more voices can be heard, even if she has to interrupt someone else to do it. She could suggest the meeting organizer schedule more time. She could send out an email with her thoughts. There are many different ways for her to handle the situation. But of course, Ava's like most of us, which means there are a couple things that sometimes keep her from making the best possible choice. First, she probably doesn't actually see all those options. In fact, most of them never occur to her. And second, among the possibilities she does see, there are really only a couple that feel comfortable and familiar enough for her to really consider. And so, because she has unconsciously limited her choices like this, she doesn't handle the situation as effectively as she could. Developing your emotional intelligence allows you to do the opposite. It makes you agile. It opens your mind up to a wide variety of options. And then, just as importantly, it helps you push yourself to act on the best option, even if it's less comfortable. And here's where the mindsets come in. These are your options. Some of them are so natural for you that they become habits. They can be a source of strength, but they can also lock you in and limit your agility. For example, maybe it causes you to give someone a third and fourth chance when a tougher approach makes more sense. Or to be assertive when really a gentle touch would be more effective. One of the most crucial steps in building your emotional intelligence, then, is learning to recognize the mindsets that fall outside your comfort zone and truly seeing the value, the flexibility, and the freedom they offer.
Alrighty. There we go.
So, you know, that video really shows understanding each mindset and recognizing what we gravitate to and what we actually can pull from is really, really important. And when you go to the next slide, Kurt, you know, going outside of your comfort zone is a good thing. But when you think about in the heat of the moment, during conflict situations, you know, there could be a very short amount of time between what happens and your response. So, you know, thinking about, you know, productive conflict and, you know, Viktor Frankl and stimulus and response, you always have a choice, and really making sure that you step back when you do make not the best decision on how to respond, or you're not using maybe the mindset that is going to serve you best, that you can really recognize that and get better in the future too.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting, Jolene, a lot of times having done so many DISC sessions, you know, I get the question, so now what, now what? And that's what I love about Agile EQ. It kind of answers that question. So what do I do? And, you know, I look at it one way for me personally to recognize when it's my, you know, my learning moment is what am I feeling emotionally, internally in that moment? If I'm getting stressed or anxious, that's probably my brain saying, here's a good time to pause, and is there a different way to approach this situation? And now having the toolkit, if you will, to at least access something, I still have to make the choice, like you said, right? But at least I have a better awareness of what I could access or try to do. Is super helpful for me.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, it's ultimately about habits, and, you know, how do you change a habit? What do you think? Put in the chat box. If you know, in the past, what have you done when you were really trying to change a habit or adopt a new one?
Yeah, we've all heard the 21 times, right? That's one that's always come up, right? Takes practice, right? April's got that one.
21 days.
Ooh, habit stacking, that's an interesting one.
Practice, lots of practice. And I always heard, you know, not practice doesn't make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect.
Yes.
Experiment, set reminders.
Yeah,
change
Nikki's a good
mindset, of course.
Get an accountability buddy that kind of can call you out when you make those. When you
I
have
love the post-it notes.
Yep. Yep.
Post-it notes.
Yes, I know. I used to do a workshop, and we talked about affirmative reminders, right? You know, setting yourself at statements that you see wherever you are regularly. You know, whether it's on the dashboard of your car or in the mirror when you're getting ready, just as reminders for that as well. So, you know, and we know it's not easy, right? I mean, it's tough. And the one thing that I find is challenging is when I am in a particularly difficult situation about a topic that I'm passionate about. That's what makes it hard for me. I have to kind of get out of my head a little bit, meaning the emotional side, and kind of step back and take a little bit more paced approach, which is not simple.
Yeah, and it does help to have somebody, a confidant like I have in so many different mentors in my life, to be able to have that frank conversation about, well, you know, have you thought about this? Have you thought about responding to this like this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what did we learn from all this?
Well, I think it's about being agile, isn't it? It's about really figuring out how do you adapt your style? How do you respond differently and more effectively? And maybe you're responding just fine now, but maybe you can kick it up a notch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and making that change, it's a series of practice steps, as everybody said. It's learning, identifying those moments, going back and saying, "Wow, this is not how I wanted to respond. This is the way I should have responded," and having that conversation, right, and using it
Yeah.
as a learning moment. One of the things.
And
Go ahead.
kind of an autopsy without blame, right?
Yeah.
It's, kind of saying, okay, well, I might not have responded very well there. And then what can I do to get better in the future? And
Yeah.
so we're actually going to support you on that journey too. And Kurt, if you get out your phone right now and put in your put in an email, and the subject line should just say Agile EQ, and type Kurt at ppstrat.com. He will send you an access code to be able to take this free assessment. You'll get it right away. And what else are we going to give them?
Well, we've talked about, for those that do take us up on this offer, is looking at how we can put together a workshop and bringing everybody together, a virtual workshop that can help give you a deeper dive in the materials that you're getting. I see Rachel said, can you send that email in the chat? I will do my best. I can do that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank goodness
Actually,
we're
you can
not.
just press the next slide.
Is it on there? I think we got a poll. We got one more poll.
Okay, but put the next slide up for now, so they can see your email.
You know what it's going to say?
What?
Poll question, I think.
Okay.
There it is. But
all right.
Here we go.
Okay. Now we'll do our final poll, right?
Yes, we can. So as you can see, my email is right there. Go ahead and send. I'm going to be very popular here, I think, in about 13 seconds.
Your email's blowing up.
Yes. So there you go, Amy, Kurt at ppstrat.com. And let me get the drop down. The last one, this is an even larger picture. We're talking a little bit about our next poll, which is...
So the first one was about you as an individual. The next one was more about your team. And this one is about the organization.
Yeah, basically the leaders. Based on your experience, what percentage of your company's leaders, we're really talking about the leaders of the organization, have developed strong EQ skills. And so based on the ranges 0 to 100, pick where you're at. We're getting quite a few folks in the middle, between 10 and 75%. This one's almost like a horse race. 50% is leading, coming around the corner, going into the last furlong at about 38%. You guys are lickety split on the votes, which is pretty awesome. So we'll give you another second or two. It's been 30 seconds to vote. About 50% still holding. 25% is in second. And then a good number, 22%, we've got at 75%, which is great. And there is a percentage at 100%. That we feel that they feel that they've done a good job, and it's probably part of their senior leadership development curricula, if you will. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end this polling.
And there was a question about, can I get it for other people on the team that are chart members? And it's just for the people on this webinar, but you can share it with somebody else if you don't want to take it and you want to share it with somebody else. Feel free to do that.
Yeah, the code is not tied directly to you. It's an easy access, and it's a one-time use code, and it does have a deadline, and you'll get a picture card that explains the deadline, but it goes well into July, if I'm not mistaken. But you'll have some time to use it as well. So as you can see, a good 50% feel like we've done some training and helped our leaders develop strong EQ skills. So some room for improvement. Those of you that are above 50%, kudos to you. Congratulations, and continue to do that training. So I think we can, ask our friend Tara Davey if I saw a few hands raised. I saw a couple of questions maybe. Do we have any questions for us? Tara? I don't see any.
No.
I'm trying to unmute myself, but it just took me a second. If there were most of the questions that I saw buried in here were much more in response to what you were doing. So I'll skim through right now. But if anyone else has any substantive questions you want to ask Jolene and Kurt, go ahead and add it to the Q&A section or the chat section now.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just The process, just let me clarify, Kurt, was that they email you and they put agile in the subject line?
Yeah, if they put agile EQ or agile, either one is fine. And just they don't even have to write anything in the body of the email, just in the subject line. And that will get me queued up to send them out a code, and I'll do that this afternoon at the latest. So Jolene, any other thoughts?
No, I really appreciate everybody joining the webinar, and reach out to us if you have questions, and look forward to seeing everybody's faces sometime in the near future.
Great, and I would love to do some sort of follow-up at some point. So keep your eye on the chart webinar page, and we'll see what else we can come up with.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, I think we did get a quick question. How do we help managers who allow personal emotions and sympathies to keep them from holding their teams accountable? Yeah. So that must be a high empathy person, but they're not really holding their teams accountable. Anything on that, Kurt?
Well, I think it really goes to that natural, that strength of empathy overused, then allows an opportunity for performance to take a drop, right? And so a person with that high empathy mindset, that's part of the shift that they have to make. How do I not use that so much that it now becomes a detractor in my ability to lead people? And so it starts with building that personal awareness. Is this an overused strength that I currently have, and what do I have to do differently? Well, the good news is they have tasks that they can do. They just have to access them on the other side, right? So maybe partnering with a person, I don't know, like myself, who is highly resolute and very focused in on doing things the right way and holding people accountable. It's not always easy for me. And I will tell you where it gets difficult for me on that side is when emotions start to rise in the conversation, because I'm not naturally connected to that emotional side and that empathy side. So that's my learning going the other way when it comes to accountability.
Yeah. And I think role playing, helping them role play it out so that they are prepared for that tougher conversation. I think that's the fear kind of comes into play. We've got quite a few questions. It's another one is, any resources you would suggest to help someone create EQ training programs for their managers?
Yeah, call Jolene and Kurt.
Yeah. And this Agile EQ assessment comes with a great training facilitator kit if you want to do it internally, as well as, emotional intelligence 2.0. It's more of a rating and kind of snippets of many different things, but that's another good resource I would suggest if you want to do a book club or something.
Yep.
And another one is,
asked a question here that I think is a good one, very timely in the respect of how do we broach this topic with our senior leaders when they are finding it hard to make time for development? Yeah,
good question. I think you have to, I learned a long time, and this this might have been a Tony one too, but you give people what they want, not what you think they need. And I think especially in today's environment, you really have to be laser focused on what's going to move the needle and what's really necessary when it comes to training. So, I think you have to make the case, honestly, and say what's going to change if we do this training. And, we can help you do that if you're interested. So,
yeah. And there's a lot of topics that as people do come back to working together, but even if you're working virtually, these issues still arise, right? Whether it's the response to the pandemic, we're all on a scale somewhere in regards to that. Equity issues, diversity, inclusion issues that are going on. And then you just layer in the basic customer service interactions.
Right.
That's a emotional intelligence opportunity. And we know those great servers or those great employees that adapt to their customers and they can read their customers. Those are the ones we hold up. Those are things you can build upon maybe to start making that case. But I do recognize it's tough because it does involve time, money, resources, all those things that are at risk right now.
Yeah. And Bill made a comment about he sees IQ skills as a strong toolbox and supplement to situational leadership development. I think that's a very, very good point. I think it all depends on where you're at, whether I'm a beginner or intermediate or advanced, and you'll see that on your assessment too. Definitely giving you different ideas about how to respond to things and improve that EQ.
Yeah. And there was last one, I don't know, I may have interrupted you when you were asking. It says, is it possible the lead person has a stronger, less empathetic viewpoint and just thinks they are not acting? The answer is yes. I think, they're thinking, well, this is the way it should be done, and why aren't they doing something about it? And I would go back into my example with my granddaughter, where I'm thinking I'm being very, how do you say, action oriented and reasonable and rational and understanding. That wasn't what the conversation had to be at that moment. The conversation had to be, hey, how are you doing? What's going on for you? What can I offer you? And then still understand the realities of tasks that I had to do and how I can blend that. But I started with me first and not them. And so a leader that has a less than empathetic is still doing that. I don't know if Jolene, that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you have to think first for yourself. And, that's who I'm in total control of, 100%. I get to learn and grow and how I respond to different situations, how I interact with the leader that might be a stronger, less empathetic person. I adjust my mindset, and that might help them in the long run. But ultimately, sometimes we have to adapt to and be agile with the leaders as well.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of Agile EQ. If you are a more empathetic leader and you're led by somebody who's less empathetic, you can put yourself in their shoes. You can think about how they might be reacting to this and approach them where they're at, right? And talk to them from that perspective rather than just trying to continue to push your viewpoint on them. And I can tell you that will just end up in a, kind of a one-way conversation. But if you can start where they're at, you might be able to have that higher degree of influence, which I think is what you're saying, Jolene, as well.
Yep.
Right? But it starts with you, right? That's
right. It starts with you.
I got to look in the mirror, is what you're telling me?
Yes.
Oh, I don't want to do that.
Well, it's been an honor and a pleasure to be able to host this with Chart and Tara and Kurt. So thank you all for attending. And I think that's a wrap.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you guys both being here. That was great. Again, it's recorded. Will be on the website later today. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.